Hi there, it's Alexandra from the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel and blog. Whether you're planning your spring garden for next year or enjoying it now but seeing a few gaps, I've got some top professional tips here from Lucy Adams, who's the head gardener at Doddington Place Gardens. And we're also going to have a tour of the gardens so you can see how her tips work out in real life. At this time of year, when the bulbs are out, it's a really good idea to keep a record of your garden and what works and what doesn't. Maybe carry a notebook with you when you go out or take photographs. And this is something that Lucy Adams, head gardener at Doddington Place Gardens, does. Because, of course, when the bulbs go over in the summer, you don't see them at all. And when it comes to buying bulbs in the autumn, you won't be able to remember where the best spots were or where there were gaps. And the other thing you can do is to go around friends' gardens or professional gardens or open gardens or really any beautiful gardens and do the same. Take notes, take photographs. And this is why I'm here at Doddington Place Gardens in Kent, where I'm also talking to the head gardener Lucy Adams and getting her tips for planting bulbs in borders, in lawns, in pots and in woodland or in shady spots that we can use in our gardens. Lucy's aim for Doddington Place Gardens is to have bulbs in flower for as long as possible, and that really means February to June. With June, of course, you're talking about the alliums, but with the daffodils, the tulips, the hyacinths, the muscari, all of that can be kept going really from February to May. And there are lots of places where you can plant bulbs. Here in Doddington, you've got them planted in the lawn, they're planted in woodland, they're planted in pots, they're planted in formal borders, and they're also scattered about lining paths. And I'll show you each of these and how it could work in your garden. When you come into Doddington Place Gardens, there are lawns and you can see the woodland on the left, but you turn to the right to go to the heart of the garden, which is the sunken garden. And here there are formal borders around a pond and high yew hedges, which are really tightly clipped, and you can see the chimneys of the house overlooking the garden. Now, in this part of the garden, Lucy treats bulbs as a very part of the formal bedding. She decides on what kind of colour scheme she's going to want in the beds, and she buys bulbs that flower from February to May within that colour scheme. She then puts them in a bucket and plants them around the garden. So they're going in mixed up. She's not lining them up. She's not putting certain kinds with certain kinds. She's allowing a sense of sort of naturalness to emerge, even in the very formal gardens. However, the difference with bulbs in the formal gardens and the rest of the gardens is that she does dig the bulbs up after they have flowered. In fact, daffodils and other bulbs are very, very good for borders because they come up and flower when not much else is around, and then as their leaves die and go over, they're often concealed by the perennials and the other plants that come up later. However, the formal beds at Doddington are gardened very intensively, so she does take the daffodils up here. If you're not going to garden intensively, if you actually just have perennials and a few annuals and you're not really thinking about producing a show border that people will come and see and gasp at, then you could leave your daffodils in from year to year. And also your hyacinths. Tulips, however, are better dug up because they often don't come back. They don't like sitting in the wet, and they can often get tulip diseases if they're left in for too long. Doddington Place Gardens had an attack of tulip diseases a few years ago, so there really are very few tulips here, except in pots. There's another border which runs alongside the sunk garden in a separate strip of garden, and this is what they call the ghost border. Now, the theme here is silver and grey, and so Lucy has, in this case, stuck to white daffodils and white bulbs, which once again she's planted with a certain sense of randomness by putting them into a bucket and then planting whatever comes out. The advice she has if you want a very controlled colour scheme like this, say just silvers and greys and whites, is that you just have to pop a bit of contrast in there to give it some zing. So she has added some really quite sharp greens from Pulmonaria and other plants. And there's a border by the tea room where Lucy has introduced some what are called pink daffodils. They are rather more peachy, she would say, but actually once again this is quite interesting to look at different shades of daffodils and maybe get different kinds of daffodils which are all in a similar shade. So when it comes to the woodland, what are the best bulbs for naturalising? Lucy says that pretty much all daffodils will naturalise, and muscari as well will naturalise well too. However, the difficulty with growing bulbs, naturalising bulbs in lawns, is making them look natural. The human eye, she says, can make patterns very easily. And if you decide you're going to plant your bulbs at random, it's just not going to look random. You're going to finish up doing patterns. So she says take a handful of bulbs, throw them across the lawn, plant them where they land, and that will give you a natural look. Bulbs in lawns don't have to be dug up over the summer. You can leave them there, but do leave the leaves for at least 6 weeks after the flower has finished, because otherwise the leaves won't have enough nutrition in the bulb to flower for next year. Leading on from the sunk garden is the rock garden. You go through a beautiful old gate, and the rock garden overlooks the Kent countryside. It slopes down to a pond, and it was created in Edwardian times and recently renovated. The rock garden is an ideal place to show how bulbs look when planting on a slope. Lucy says that slopes are a good place to plant bulbs, particularly bulbs like daffodils, and what she does with that is that she either scatters them across in a natural way, like swathes, or else choose little pockets, create little pockets so that you get a little pocket of daffodils or perhaps a little pocket of tulips or muscari. When it comes to planting daffodils in shady areas or under trees, you can always plant all sorts of bulbs under deciduous trees and shrubs. That's trees and shrubs that lose their leaves over the winter. For most of the time that the bulbs are up, there won't be any leaves above them, so they'll get plenty of light, and it's a wonderful way of creating interest, because bulbs against old bark is lovely and bulbs against colourful bark is lovely. And if you want to grow bulbs near evergreen trees, Lucy suggests going on the edge of the canopy so that they will get some light. All bulbs do need some light. If you've got very deep shade, Lucy would suggest choosing a different sort of plant to get flowers at this time of year. For example, hellebores can take much more shade than bulbs can. And pulmonarias as well are good. So what plants go well with daffodils? Here there are some wonderful combinations. There's the big elephant's ear bergenias, some of them in red, which look great against the yellow and orangey daffodils. Primroses are out at the same time, and primulas, and Lucy says you can now get a wide range of colours, and she does some really lovely things with matching up the colours. So you'll see a sort of slightly lemony daffodil against a slightly lemony flowered shrub, or a very pale primrose with a very pale daffodil, or equally going for some contrast with a bright blue muscari and a fairly yellow daffodil. So contrast the flowers or match the flowers, but don't forget about the foliage. Here we'll see hebes and daffodils. Those look great together, a sort of purple hebe and a yellow daffodil. That's a lovely contrast. And of course the zingy green of euphorbias at this time of year is just fabulous with the whites and the yellows of many bulbs. And so what about bulbs in pots? Lucy says that in fact pretty much all bulbs grow well in pots, so it's just a question of choosing what you like, deciding on a colour scheme you like, etc. The one thing she would say is to watch out for is to consider the heights. If you have something like a tulip which is really low, or a daffodil which is really high, then the very low plants really won't show over the edge of the pot, and the very high ones will tend to get blown over in the wind. So that is the one thing that she would tell you to look out for. I've done a playlist of interviews with head gardeners with some wonderful tips we can take away for our gardens, and that's at the end of this video. And there are also links to Doddington Place Gardens in the description below. And if you'd like more tips, ideas and inspiration for your middle-sized garden, then do subscribe to the Middlesized Garden YouTube channel, and thank you for watching.